Hi everyone, welcome back. Today I'm going to be doing the Synastry chart between Jonas and Sophie Turner. I've had a lot of requests, so I'm finally getting to this chart. Her Chiron conjuncts his ascendant, 0 degrees, and the ascendant is a very important angle in a Synastry chart, so you have to pay attention to what energies make aspects to your angles. Her Chiron is in the sign of Libra, which rules relationships. So she did bring a lot of pain to him regarding this marriage. Chiron can be a healing energy, but you really have to pay attention to what goes on in the rest of the Synastry chart to make that final determination. His Lilith conjuncts her North Node, 3 degrees. Whatever conjuncts your North Node from the other person, that will be the basic theme of the relationship for you. And in this case, it's Lilith, and Lilith has to do with raw sexuality. So I think that this relationship was predominantly based on a sexual and attraction and intimacy. Since his Lilith is conjuncting her North Node, that was really the basic theme of the relationship for her. His Sato, Bacchus, and Alma conjuncts her vertex and Pholus, 1 degree. The vertex is another really important point in a compatibility chart. It's like a second ascendant. So these energies will affect you strongly. His Alma conjuncting her vertex, Alma has to do with soul. So in the beginning of the relationship, he brought a lot of soul into it, but it's also holding hands with Bacchus and Sato. And Sato has to do with a sadistic sort of energy, like a meanness. And Bacchus has to do with an overindulgence, usually with partying. But since his Bacchus is falling into her 6th house, that can signify that there's an overindulgence here with his work. Now, these 3 asteroids are not only conjuncting her vertex, but are conjuncting her Pholus asteroid as well. And Pholus has to do with an explosion. So these energies really came front and center to her and affected her strongly. Now, I want to go back to the Sato asteroid. I don't know if he's a mean person or not, but when you have 2 people, when you have their 2 natal charts plugged into each other, and if certain asteroids are making connection to another's planets, or in this case, Pholus, that can magnify that energy. It's like taking a plug and putting it into a socket and it lights up. So between the 2 of them, there was a lot of dissension and possible explosions. His Niobe conjuncts her Sun, 0 degrees, and also her Mars by 3 degrees. Niobe is an asteroid that has to do with children, specifically losing your children. And since his Niobe is in the 5th house, the 5th house does rule children. So this signifies to me that there's a possibility that he could lose the children to her. I don't know if they're going to court over custody battles yet, but since the Niobe is conjuncting her Sun and Mars, those 2 planets together are very powerful. And Mars brings extra fire and power to the Sun, and it'll illuminate these energies. And I think that if the final determination, I would say that she would probably get more time with their children than he does. That's just my prediction looking at this chart. His point of fortune conjuncts her Saturn and Attica by 2 degrees. And the point of fortune looks like a circle with a cross in the middle. It's like a mini Jupiter, and it magnifies the energies of whatever it conjuncts. And in this case, Attica, that has to do with prison. And Saturn holding hands with Attica, Saturn is a very binding effect. It's oppressive, and it has a chilling effect. So this means to me that she felt that she was trapped in this relationship. Her Dejanira, Lamia, Nemesis, and Eros conjuncts his vertex and chaos, 0 degrees. That's the tightest orb that you can get. Dejanira has to do with victimhood. Lamia has to do with extreme grief. Nemesis has to do with betrayal or becoming an enemy. And Eros has to do with eroticism. So that's what she brought into this relationship, and it's touching his vertex. Like I said, very important point. So let me break this down. He became a victim of her due to Dejanira. There was extreme grief that he felt over the loss of this relationship and Nemesis, betrayal by her. I would say that she cheated on him. I also think that he cheated on her as well. I will get to that important aspect in a few seconds. Eros, she brought him eroticism. So that ties back into Lilith conjuncting her north node. So see how this is tying together? Her swindle conjuncts his north node 2 degrees. So the basic theme of the relationship for him had to do with her swindling him in some way. Swindle, if you break it down, those energies have to do with either lying, cheating, and a general swindle. It's pretty much self-explanatory. So that was basically the theme of the relationship. Her Nessus squares his Mars 1 degree, and Nessus has to do with abuse. And since it's squaring his Mars, this happened behind the scenes, and I think that she was abusive towards him. Nobody really saw that. The squares usually happen behind closed doors. Not always, but his Mars brings fire and power to that, and it's a friction that can't be resolved. His Jupiter and swindle conjuncts her icy and typhoon by 0 degrees. Jupiter, the largest planet in the solar system, conjuncting swindle, it magnified that energy, and it's conjuncting her IC. So we have, again, swindle, possible lying and cheating. Conjuncting her typhoon, this is an overwhelming psychological event that affects you strongly, and it's both of them had a very negative effect on each other. His Chiron, Casanova, conjuncts her Lilith, 3 degrees. Chiron, conjuncting her Lilith, no sex. I've seen this multiple times before. In the beginning, yes, obviously they were intimate because they have children, but over time, the passion that they had in the beginning wasn't sustainable, because when Chiron steps in and conjuncts Lilith, that's an automatic red flag of the breakdown of intimacy between two people, ending in no intimacy at all. His Casanova also conjuncts her Lilith, and that has to do with cheating. I've seen this one multiple times as well. His Mars trines her Casanova, cheating. Mars, extra fire and power to that asteroid, and it's a trine. And the energy flows very freely when you have a trine. They're like cheerleaders. It's just, to me, that's another red flag as well. His Chiron also conjuncts her Dionysus. And Dionysus has to do with partying and drinking. So when you have Chiron conjuncting that, he brought her pain because of her partying and her drinking, and Dionysus has to do with wine, and it's like a Animal House scene. So picture that. The interesting part of this relationship is that her narcissist conjuncts his Echo by 1 degree. And I've talked about that energy in another video, but I'll just briefly go over it. In Greek mythology, Echo fell in love with Narcissus, and Narcissus was just in love with himself, and he would stare at himself in the lake, in the water, looking at, admiring his self-importance. And Echo was rejected by Narcissus, and this has a tale of unrequited love. And then Echo went back into the forest due to the rejection and pined over Narcissus for the rest of her life. Now, in this case, her Narcissus conjuncts his Echo. So this signifies to me that she was the one that basically started the ending of the relationship altogether. I mean, he may have filed for divorce first, but she started the whole energy, and the ball started rolling. Also, his Uranus conjuncts her Taureau in midheaven. And Uranus has a very unstable energy. You can't really predict what's going to happen. Unstable, unpredictable. And it's conjuncting her Taureau. And Taureau has to do with being a bully or bossiness. So all of a sudden, she just turned out and decided, to be a bully and bossy. And since this is conjuncting her midheaven, these energies will gradually show up, and the general public will see these energies that are happening between these two. Her Uranus conjuncts his moon 2 degrees. This is also very unstable for him emotionally. She could be there front and center and give him what he needs, but then all of a sudden she can disappear and he doesn't know where she is. And it leaves him in a vulnerable position because he doesn't have the emotional stability that he needs from her. Her Apophis also squares his moon 0 degrees, and Apophis has to do with destruction. So this is just adding insult to injury, because her Uranus is conjuncting his moon, her Apophis is squaring his moon, and the emotional needs that he would like to get from her are just not available. Her Lacrimosa conjuncts his Icy 2 degrees. I've already explained about the Icy. Very important angle. It's where your inner child lives. So her Lacrimosa, these energies have to do with crying and tears. And this also happens behind the scenes because it opposes the midheaven. Now, since she's the narcissist in this relationship, in my opinion, I don't think those tears were genuine. I think that they're crocodile tears. And that's very indicated, actions from a narcissist. Now, I'm going to get to some planetary aspects. And this is really important because his moon sextiles her moon 0 degrees. And that's really a nice placement. I'm a big fan of the luminaries, and I always look to the moon first. But it's interesting because there's a couple of planetary aspects and also the asteroids that negated the positivity of these moon connections. And the moon is very delicate. But the planetary aspects that I'm going to get to that ruined this, and I've already explained the asteroid part, but his moon also conjuncts her Mercury 3 degrees, and that's wonderful for emotional communication. But his Mars opposes her Mars 3 degrees, and that results in huge ego battles and arguments. And 3 degrees is tight. You also have to consider the orb as well. His Mars squares her Pluto 4 degrees. Again, we have 2 scorpionic planets. Mars is the lower octave of Pluto. It's squaring her Pluto. And these energies, there's a friction here because of the square that cannot be resolved. Huge ego battles and possible estrangement and or hatred. And I'm going on the extreme side here. This orb is at 4 degrees, so that's, I would say, moderate, but it still really ruined the other wonderful placements in this chart. And the only really wonderful ones that I saw were Moon sextile Moon and Moon conjunct Mercury. So that's all I have today, and I will be back soon with other synastry charts. So hit the subscribe button to stay in the loop. Have a nice day.